In this video, I'm going to be working through Programming Project 5.5 from the Lewis textbook, 3rd edition. So up here, I've typed in the text for this problem. And let me read through this, and then I'm going to talk about it a bit. Our aim is to design and implement a class called dog that contains instance data that represents the dog's name and age, define the dog constructor to accept the initialized instance data, include getter and setter methods for the name and age, include a method to compute and return the age of the dog in person years, 7 times the dog's age, include a toString method that returns a one-line description of the dog, create a driver class called kennel whose main method instantiates and updates several dog objects. So this is the entirety of our problem statement. And you may notice over in BlueJ, I don't actually have any files yet. So we're basically going to be doing this entire thing from scratch. I am going to go over and kind of go through the details of this thing. Before I do that, I'm going to go ahead and create a class because really I want to copy and paste this into my source code file, some places I can actually start rewriting this, right? Because I need to break down the text here and kind of get a more granular description of what I need to do. So rather than use Notepad, I'll just go ahead and start building up a class. So over here, kind of the first line here was saying, oh, implement a dog class. So I'm pretty sure it's going to be a safe bet if I go ahead and create a class called dog because we're going to need that at some point. And here, let me put in the comment. I already put this in kind of the multi-line comment format. But we'll paste it into our file. And because this is BlueJ, it added some kind of default information here for us. I'm going to go ahead and delete that out. I don't really want to worry about that right now. So now let's go ahead and take a look at this, what we need to do. So the first thing is asking us to build a new class, a class called dog. And then it tells us a few things about how it should be structured. It tells us first what type of variables that class should contain, right? That's what this here is about, right? It's saying instance data, right? What variables does that class contain, right? What is the information or the state that defines the things that are like a dog, right? The dog concept. Well, in this case, we're being asked to put in a name and an age. So I'm actually going to make a note over here, right? I'm going to have my instance data, and I know that I need to have name and age. So I'll make a note down here, right? I'm kind of just walking through this text, and I'm going to make notes to myself saying, oh, this is what I need to implement. Okay, so next thing. Define the dog constructor to accept the initialized instance data. Okay, so we need to put a constructor in this class. And that constructor should accept and initialize instance data, right? So in that case, this part of the problem is saying that, oh, you need to refer back to name and age, right? You need to have a way to set up name and age with their initial value. So let's make another note down here, constructor. Takes name and age, right? Something that just lets us set up the state of that object or that class. Reading some more. Include getter and setter methods for name and age. This class is saying that I need to have some way to make that information available. And for that, I think I'll just copy and paste that text down there. It's already pretty concise. Let's see. Include a method to compute and return the age of a dog in person years. And then it gives me the kind of the formula here. So that's going to be another method I need to do, right, in addition to my getter and setter. So let me copy and paste this down here as well. Format it up as a comment really quick. That's a little long, but that's all the information we need, so that's fine. So moving on, include a toString method that returns a one-line description of the dog. All right, so we need yet another method. So now we're up to a total of 4. And I'll go ahead and copy and paste that comment down here. This last part here says create another class, right? Create a driver class called kennel. When they say driver class, what they're really meaning is just something to guide, right, or to test your main class, right? Our main class we want to work on is dog, but by itself, dog just kind of sits there, right? We need another class that will actually make instances of the dog class, right? We'll actually create dogs. That way we can test it and see whether those dogs act or work the way we expect them to. So here we're just saying create another class called kennel, whose main method instantiates and updates several dog objects. So I know I'm actually going to need to make a second class here. And I'll go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and create kennel. So here I'll have my second file. And I'm going to clean this up as well. I don't really want to have all this kind of default text that BlueJ has. So I'll delete that out. And then I'll copy and paste that information, right? I'll come back to kennel once I actually have worked on dog, right? Once I'm happy with dog, I'll work on kennel. Actually, on second thought, maybe that's not what we should do. Maybe we should build kennel at the same time as dog. Because if we build kennel at the same time as dog, then we'll be able to use kennel to test dog as we work on it, right? As we build it up. So probably what we'll do is we'll fill in a few methods in dog, make sure that compiles, and then write some code in kennel to test the functionality in dog that we have built out. For now, I'm going to go ahead and close this kennel file. I don't really need it right now. So we've kind of broken down a problem. we have a general idea of what variables that class is going to need, right? Then I know that I need to have a constructor set up a certain way, and then I have a list of methods that I need to implement. Just going from top to bottom, let's start by putting in the instance variables. So here it says I need something for name and age. Well, if I'm talking about a name, I think it would make sense to use something like a string, right? I want to have some string of text that represents the name of this dog. For age, well, I'm pretty sure that's going to be integer, right? We maybe could also have thought about using something like a double, but I think probably an integer makes more sense, right? We're just going to count the number of years. We don't need to make it too complicated. There could have been a requirement though, right? There could have been a requirement that says, oh, you need to use int, use double. In this case, it didn't really say anything, right? It just said age. Well, if it just says age, you make a reasonable assumption. So these are my two variables. But what I'm going to do before I continue on is modify their visibility. So I'm going to set these both to be private. Remember that one of the goals of OOP and Java specifically, right, is to have data be encapsulated, right? You don't want to have data just kind of out there and anybody can change it, right? If a class contains information, it contains state, it should keep that state to itself, right? It should be the only one that has control or access over that information. To that end, I'm going to make both of these private, meaning that only dog can access these variables directly. Our next step is going to be filling out the constructor. And I do have a little bit of requirements here, right? It says I need to make a constructor that takes name and age. So I'm going to type out here first the word public. Remember that all constructors have to be public. And I'll just call this constructor dog, right? Must be the same name as the class. And then for parameters, I'll take in a string called n, which is what the user will use to pass in a name, and then an integer that the developer will use to pass in the age of the dog. Inside of here, I need to save those two pieces of information into my local state, right? Into my instance variables. So what I'll write here is I'll write name equal n and age equal a, right? So I'm just assigning those two values that came in as parameters, right? These two things here. I'm just assigning them to the local variables, right? Which are name and age. Those are the ones that are defined up here. Before I get too far, let me go ahead and compile this. Make sure I'm in a good place. No syntax errors. That's what I wanted to see. That looks good, so I'll go ahead and remove my comment here. Then it says include getter and setter methods for the name and age. Well, before that, I'm actually going to jump down a little bit to the toString method. Remember that toString is a very useful method for debugging. So I'm going to go and implement that right now so I can see if this dog class works, right? If I can create a dog and assign it a name and assign it an age. So over here, I'm going to go ahead and type in kind of the standard signature for this method, right? Which is string toString. No parameters, just blank. Inside the method, I'll go ahead and start typing. So let's do return name is age, right? So this will display the name of the dog, followed by a space, the word is, plus age. So maybe this has Fido is age 3, or some other dog's name. Let's compile this. Here I got an error. Over here, Java is complaining that I'm attempting to assign a weaker access privilege. So I actually made a little bit of a typo here, which is I didn't put any modifier in front of this method. Before over here, right, we had private, public. Over here, what we really need to do is type in public as well. Otherwise, Java complains. It says, well, you've built out toString, which I know is meant to display the different things in this class, and I know it should also be available to other classes to call, but you haven't given me any visibility. And by default, everything's going to be private, so that means that new method you've implemented won't actually be usable by anybody. So Java complains, and the way we fix that is just by saying, yes, I did mean for it to be a public method. It would be nice if we could run this right now, but if you actually go and try to do that, you'll notice that there's no actual main for us to click on and run, right? Right now we just have a dog class, but there is no entry point to this program, right? There's no way for it to actually start. So that's actually what the purpose of kennel is, right? Kennel was another piece of source code, or another file, I should say, that was designed to be set up as a driver, right? It's set up to test the dog class. Right now it's blank, but let's change that. The first thing we need to do is put in a main, right? We need to have some place for this program to start. So let's go ahead and do our public static void main, and then we'll have this kind of bit of code here. You'll understand what this means later once we talk about arrays. So this is our entry point to our program, right? This is where it'll start if we go to run it. Inside this, let's try making two new dogs. So let's go dog d1 equal new dog, and I'll give it a name. I'll call it Fido, and we'll say that Fido is 5 years old. And then let's go ahead and make a second dog as well. And let's call this will be D2 for the second dog. And over here where I'll call this, let's say Fido 2.0 or Fido Junior. And we'll give Fido Junior an age of 1. So let's compile this. Now it'll compile fine. Before I run this though, I want to actually write some code that'll do something. So over here I'm going to add another line here to print out these two dogs. So let's print out dog 1, and then actually do the second dog as well by itself. So D1 and D2. So this now, if I run it, I should get information back from both dogs. So I run this and we get back the messages. Fido is 5, Fido Junior is 1. So that's what I was hoping to see. So right now, I can be fairly certain that this part of the class I've already written is working like I wanted it to. My name and my age are being stored appropriately. Since I have two classes now, I'm going to keep them both open. So I'm going to have dog on the top and kennel at the bottom. So let's go back to our list of things to do in dog. So the next thing on our to-do list is to include getter and setter methods for the name and age. So the point of that is we want to make this bit of information available outside, right? We made it private, so right now nobody can get at it, but we'll add so-called wrapper methods that let other classes or other objects access that information. Let's start with name. For this method, we want to go with something that's public, right? We want to be able to make this name available to everyone. So let me write this out really quick and then we'll talk about it. This is a very simple method to just return the name of this variable, right? That's the intent here. We're providing a getter, right? Something that lets us get information out of this class. So I have here a method, which is public. Its return type is string, and its name is getMain. There is no parameters. And inside of that, the only thing it does is it returns the value inside of name. So that's going to be my getter for name. But what about the setter? So in this case, I'm going to have a public void, and I'll go set name. And over here now I have one parameter, which is n. That's going to be the new name. And it's going to look a little bit like the constructor. Here I've written a method that I can pass in a new name, right? And that's going to be stored in n. A new name will be stored into name, right? That local variable. So this gives me a way to rename my dog. And then I'm going to write similar methods for the age as well. These are going to be pretty much the same thing, but the types are going to be a little bit different. So over here I'm going to use integer instead of string. And then inside I'll do a return age, right? So this is now a method that returns the age of the dog. Moving along, let's go ahead and do the set. Going to be back to void. Set age, and the parameter here is going to be an integer because that's, again, the type of the age that the dog has. And we'll go age equal a. So this works the same way as the one we wrote a minute ago, except that it's in terms of the age variable. Let's compile this. Okay, things still look good. Scrolling down, I'll go ahead and get rid of that remark there. So we've already figured that out. Let's jump back to kennel though and make sure that code is really working the way we think it will. Since we just added our get and our set methods, we'll need to write some code here that can test it out. As an initial test, let me try changing the name on a dog. So I'm going to make a copy of this last print statement. And then between those two prints, for the second dog, for Fido Jr., I'll put in a line of code that says set age 2. Right? So this, hopefully, will print out first that Fido Jr. is 1. And then after we call set age, it'll print out that Fido Jr. is 2. So let's compile kennel, and we'll run it. So now we get Fido is 5. And then the first time we print out Fido Jr., we get 1. And the second time we print out Fido Jr., we get 2. So it looks like things are working. We were able to use set age to change the age of Fido Jr. Let's also try one of the get methods. Let's try get name. So I'm going to put in another print. And over here what I'll do is I'll do d2.getName. So hopefully this just returns Fido Jr. Let's run this. That's what we get back. So these are the lines from before. And then our new line here just says Fido Jr. That text was just returned by our call to get name, right? So that Fido Jr. comes from this. Okay, so let's jump back up to dog. And for dog, we just have a couple more methods to implement. Or actually just one. We actually already implemented toString, so we can actually get rid of that. Our toString method, right, was supposed to return a one-line description of the dog, and that's what we have so far. So let's delete that. And go back up here, finish my last method. Now I'm going to create a method that actually does some work. It actually computes something. Our goal is to compute the age of the dog in person years. So I need to think about a signature. Well, for starters, I know I want this to be public, right? I know I want other places in my program to be able to find out what that dog's person years age is. Then we need to think about the return type. Here it says age, and if I were to scroll up, you'll notice that of course age is an integer. So that'll be our return type here, right? Just an integer to match with what I'm storing the dog's age as normally. The next thing is to pick an actual name for this method. I think we'll just go with get person age. The last thing to think about would be adding some parameters. Fortunately, dog already has all the information that's needed to compute a dog's person age. We don't need anything else, right? We already contain the age information. So I could just do open close parentheses. Let me put in my bracers here so I have an actual method. Inside of this, I now need to write some code to actually compute that new age of the dog. 7 times the dog's age. That's how I compute person years. So inside of the method, I'll simply write return age times 7. And that should work. It's giving us the dog's age times 7, which is exactly what we want. When we compile this, no problem. Down here, I'm going to go ahead and add in some more test code. So what I want to do is I want to test to see, does this method work properly? And we'll actually write a couple lines here. Let's go get person age here, right? So this is at the very beginning, at the very end, where I've already updated Fido Jr.'s age. So I'll add a get person age there. And then I'll also add one before we make Fido Jr. older. So hopefully this one returns 7, this one returns 14. Compile this, run it, and that's what we get. 7 over here, 14 over here. One thing we might want to do is make toString encompass the person age as well. So let's do that. Over here I'll type in dog years and get person age in person years. So this is my new and improved method, and this should now print out the text saying something along the lines of Fido Jr. is 1 in dog years and 7 in person years. I'll compile this really quick. Everything looks good there. One thing you may notice here is that there is different syntax for the age over here and the age over here. Remember that that's because this age is available as an instance variable, right? It's already available to me. I don't have to do any work to get it. Versus person age actually requires some math, right? It requires me to multiply age by 7. Because of that, what I actually did was I implemented a method that would actually perform that computation. And so this over here is me calling the method in order to compute that value. Jumping back to kennel, let's actually clean this up a little bit. Let me get rid of the get person age and then the get name as well. So over here, right, I have my text to print out the first dog, then the second dog, change the age, and then print out the second dog again. So let's compile this. And here I'm going to go ahead and clear my output just so I can see exactly what I'm getting back. And then I'll run this. So here we go. Fido is 5 in dog years and 35 in person years. Fido Jr. is 1 year in dog years and 7 years in person years. Fido Jr. is 2 in dog years and 14 in person years. From this output, it looks like our class is working pretty well. If I wanted to, I could also implement some other dogs here, right? Maybe I wanted to test out things a little more thoroughly. At this point, we're pretty much done. Taking care of all the requirements in dog, right? And I can actually delete this text here. I've taken care of all those requirements, right? So I could read back up here, and I could double check. I'll let you do that if you want to. Let's resize the code a little bit. So now I can see this is my entire class here. Overall, it's not that complicated. We just have 2 instance variables and then 6 methods. Down here, my kennel is also pretty straightforward. Over here, I didn't really write that comprehensive of a test suite. I only have created 2 dogs. Maybe if this is a homework assignment, I would need to have a much more comprehensive test, right? I would need to create both different dogs. I would need to check not only set age, but set name, get name. Here, though, I've just written my 2 test cases, and that should be good enough for me. So there we go, the solution to project 5.5.